Welcome to Piecing It Together with Annika and Ben. My name is Annika.
And I'm Ben.
And we are here to talk to people who are cultivating pockets of peace in a world that all too often assumes violence is inevitable.
Today, we are joined by Mudit Suri. Mudit is the accompaniment strategist for the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. Mudit, I'm going to ask the most basic question first, because I'm going to confess I don't know what an accompaniment strategist is. I don't know what it is you do. And so I want to officially be today years old when I finally learn what exactly it is that Mudit does. So tell us, what is it that you do?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ben and Annika, for having me on your podcast. It is an honor to come join you, have a conversation about what I do, about what is accompaniment, right? Accompaniment means walking alongside individuals and communities in need of support that might be going through challenging times. So that's like the basic definition, which I think can resonate with people, is just being physically and emotionally present, standing in solidarity, listening to stories, and respecting the agency of people and communities. At PPF, for instance, accompaniment is about creating equal partnerships based on trust and mutual learning, particularly with communities facing violence or human rights abuses. So that is precisely what accompaniment is. It is being physically and emotionally present with someone who might be in need. Now, that someone can be an individual or a community. They can be your neighbors. They can be a population that is across seven seas, right? It is um, it is a situation given the globalization, uh, that we are going through as a society, as the human race. We are seeing people and communities suffering everywhere. It's not just um, some countries in Africa or Asia or South America, even here in the U.S. So it is basically being with them in times of need and just letting them know that there are people who care about what is happening there. And yeah, seeing just yeah, that's basically what is accompaniment.
So is there like, I guess as I hear you talking, right? So
Yeah,
I kind of hear like there's the sort of emotional spiritual presence, right, of being present with people who are in various states of crisis or
yeah.
tragedy or whatever. Are there like practical things too? I mean, like, is it sort of missional in a sense? Like, I mean, is it helping people develop, or I mean, is it mostly just really being present?
Okay. So then accompaniment really is a little different from mission work because in the sense that accompaniers go and be parts of the daily lives of people
Mm,
and communities in need without having a solution, without coming, I'm your rescuer. I'm going to come rescue you from this big monster, or the crisis that you're facing currently. It is just listening to them. And you know most times people going through tough times have their own solutions, so it's
mm.
about listening to them and advocating for their own agency. It isn't about saying what you can do for them. Really, it's so that's where it differs. It's You're not going there to build a school, you're not going there to build a hospital for them, but it's advocating for systemic changes. That's I think that's the difference here. Yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense. So you go in as kind of an embedded person,
Yeah.
and kind of help them, I guess, strengthen support structures that
Yeah.
exist or
Mhm.
create ones that are necessary for
Yeah.
for their healing or advancement or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I finally understand. I feel very informed.
Yeah.
Annika.
I think I'm still coming to understand it. And so, okay, so Moody, I'm going to say something I think is true about accompaniment,
Okay.
and you're going to confirm or correct it as the
Okay.
person who does the work. I I understand accompaniment as the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship has used it, especially in a global sense of having like American citizens, American members of PPF, um, get connected through leaders like yourself, with global communities in need of some kind of solidarity or support, that like they can leverage the power of kind of having Americans put a spotlight on them
Hmm.
to get the attention that they're not getting, that they need locally, and to create a little bit of to leverage power and privilege to put some pressure to solve more local issues. So it's not like you have a group of American travelers coming in with a ton of resources, but you do have some folks from outside of a community coming in to be a witness and be a presence and to go, hey, we care about this.
Yeah.
Who's helping you and who should be? Is that a correct summary? And if it's
So
not, please God, tell me
no,
what I'm missing, because I'm
no,
also curious about this.
no, Annika, that's a good point, and yeah, that is how it was, how PPF's accompaniment program worked in the past until until COVID, and that's when the brakes, they had to pump the brakes because the world came to shut down. But that is precisely it. Like understanding. Well, let me retrace here. So the accompaniers that went to say Colombia, right, historically, they didn't bring any resources with them, but they understood the privilege that they had of being American citizens, American passport holders, uh, that carries, and because of the foreign policies, right? So you have to look at it in a in a macro through a macro lens. The Colombian economy is very dependent on the U.S. economy. So the presence of American citizens in a small community that might be facing some crisis or security issues, right? In Colombia, the presence of American citizens there shines that light. It's like, okay, here's the focus. There's some American citizens in this community who are accompanying this community need, and that shines that focus light on that community and their needs at that time. So it is, you're right, you summarized it perfectly. So it is understanding your own privilege, and you know obviously not being oblivious to it, but understanding your privilege, but using it in a way that is still respectful, humble, uh, and you know one of the core concepts of accompaniment is a collaborative approach. So being really truly partners with the people you accompany. So while you recognize your privilege that yeah, you can just take a flight back when you want to, this community stays, understanding that is important, and then using that privilege in a way that is respectful and humble, right? So that's something that accompaniers normally would, if especially if they're from the Western world or more developed economies, then that's something that they would need to really work on or understand that it's not like, okay, just I'm not privileged, I'm here with you as one. No, I think you have to understand your privilege. It is a good first step, but then using that in a way that's still respectful and still staying grounded. So that's the part that I think our companies really need to really work on. Yeah.
So I think I'm stealing one of Annika's questions, but which is I guess okay.
Steal
Um,
away, steal
yeah,
away.
this is
I suspect we may have a lot of shared questions on this front.
I
So,
think we probably
Mudit,
do.
you're a guest I'm excited to talk to for that reason. Yeah.
So accompaniment strategist, I feel like is not a job you open the newspaper and see, right? So like, how does somebody get into this work? I mean, like, and is this like are there a lot of people who do this work?
So I don't know if a lot of people are doing this work. To be honest, um, it's my first role as an accompaniment strategist. Previously, I've done a lot of work with the UN in
Mm,
peace building and disarmaments, and I was introduced to accompaniment while I was working as a peace builder with the UN mission in Colombia. So
Oh.
yeah, so I've worked in Colombia before as a there's a special political mission of the UN there to ensure the implementation of the peace accord between the rebel group FARC and the government that was signed in 2016. So that mission is there to ensure its implementation, and I was one of the officers, field officers there at that time. So that's when I was really, I learned about um, people of faith going down to communities and staying with them and heard about this accompaniment work which I hadn't known. My background was not in accompaniment specifically, but yeah, so that's how I was introduced to it at first, and then obviously applying for this job that I did last year. That's when I really, started doing my research on it. Okay, what it is, what it means.
Hmm.
So I see accompaniment as as a as a tool of a broader concept that's peacemaking and peace building, right? Um, that those are words that are probably more recognizable and more heard about than accompaniment specifically, but that's how I see it. I don't know if there are a lot of people doing accompaniment work currently, but if you look at them through a lens of peace builders or peacemakers, there. There's no there's no limited supply of people working, doing this incredible work, selfless and important. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think the kind of thesis of this podcast is that when we talk about peacemaking, peacemaking involves a lot of different work beyond what you might consider the quote unquote traditional kind of activism. Um, and you mentioned that you understand this work as peacemaking work. How do you, I'm trying to put the words together. How do you see accompaniment and peacemaking going hand in hand?
Okay. So let me first say what my understanding of peacemaking is, and then try to link it to try to link accompaniment to peacemaking.
Awesome.
Uh, yeah. So for me, I think peacemaking is this intentional effort to build bridges and relationships between two or more parties that might be in an armed or non-armed conflict with each other. It is about understanding the root causes of conflict and finding an inclusive approach based on justice, equity, and reconciliation. So basically, that's uh, and if you say look up the definitions of accompaniment, right? That is also what it tries to do. It tries to reconcile people. It tries to the one of the main objectives is justice, advocacy for positive change, and finding root causes. Because when you're embedded in a community or a society that is going through a crisis, you are able to understand how did they get there. Like listening to their stories, you're able to understand the root causes of their issues or problems without having a solution in mind, but you're just able to get that listening to their real life stories and not just reading policy papers, right? So you're able to get this this perspective, this insider information by being a part of the communities. That is, I think, how accompaniment and peacemaking are related, right? Because the objectives are same. I consider peacemaking as a um, broader strategy, uh, which does also have um, include other more tangible resources at times, including say developing or constructing hospitals and schools, as I mentioned. Whereas accompaniment, how it might differ from peacemaking, is that your sole objective is to be with that community or individual who might be in crisis, accompany them through that, and without having these um, tangible charity work, sort of, but while it still focuses on transformation. So it's not really passive, right? It's not passive. It is very much active. This accompaniment strategy is very active, but it focuses more on addressing the root causes by advocating for change. So that's how I think, according to me, that's how they relate. Uh, I hope I made sense here. Trying to yeah, relate both of them.
So as you've been talking, a word keeps coming up, and I'm going to admit that it perks up my little Benedictine ears every time I hear it. And that's the concept of humility, right? Which is such a big part of the work we do with other humans, right? I'm a firm believer that humility could transform the world in a very positive way, and that it may be the best superpower we have access to. But I mean, humility, right? It's a I see it as kind of our relationship with God and with each other. And so I'm curious how often you kind of find it. Humility is challenging, right? Americans aren't known for it. We're not good at it. And so when we go into other places, right, there is a tendency to patronize, right? There is a tendency to sort of be saviors.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering how you nurture your own humility, because you've done work, right, that requires empathy and humility on levels that most of us, can barely comprehend on some days. So, how do you nurture those things, right? I mean, how do you keep yourself healthy?
Okay. Yeah. Those are really good questions, Ben. And I think there is no one size fits all sort of strategy here for everyone that works. I can share my own experiences with that. As for nurturing my own humility, I think my background has a lot to do with it. I'm from India. My family's from
Mm,
India. My family. So my grandfather was a refugee in India, uh, from Pakistan, and just knowing, like, having to restart lives is something that I've heard of, listened to my parents talk about, my grandparents talk about. So I guess um, I have that background, right? So when I am in a community that is going through either similar crisis, I can relate to it. I can relate
Hmm.
to it because those are stories that I have heard about and been raised up on, right? I can relate to them, and being, I think, being present with them without having that inclination, right? Sometimes we humans, we always are like, oh, is there a problem? How can I solve it? And that's
mm,
how a lot of our
That
brains work. Yeah,
that strikes me as the hardest part of your job,
yeah,
honestly, is
yeah,
resisting that reflex.
yeah, right. Because we see a problem as humans, we just want to solve it, right? And I think if you're able to control that urge, oh, someone tells you, like, okay, uh, this is what you can do. If you are able to, I think, hold that urge to provide a solution right away, or to be that savior, uh, this foreign savior in these communities, then I think you are indirectly nurturing your humility, right? I think you're able to just, you know what, just take in all the thoughts, take in all the inputs, and just let them sit with you. Let just sit with you. If you have a really strong urge to share a solution, maybe wait for it. See if you still want to share it after a week, after a day, or something. And I think that would help. So that has helped me um, in the past, and I think that's something I would try to continue doing, and I because it worked for me. Uh, and how do I take care of myself? So that is also a really tricky thing to do in this line of work, because so often you are faced with traumatic experiences, uh, and there is a real risk of secondary trauma,
Mm,
uh, of getting that. So knowing, I think it's extremely important that anyone who is doing peace building, peacemaking, accompaniment work, they have some sort of training in identifying these signs of trauma.
Mm.
Because a person who starts, if you are able to um, if you're able to identify those signs, I think you're able to protect yourself
mm,
and the people you are hoping to serve or hoping to be with, right? So it is very important that people are trained in understanding and identifying these signs and how to cope with them, right? That could be some of the coping mechanisms could be getting some professional support or taking some time off, doing things that help you um, help you be the best person you are. That could be okay, going on a hike, reading a book, taking some time off, going to a movie, anything really that would just give you that reset button. So I think that's important, because unfortunately, if a person who is, say, a company or a peacemaker and is embedded in a community and starts feeling those symptoms of trauma, of secondary trauma, or even sometimes it's possible that your own trauma comes back listening to these stories, right?
Mhm.
So you have to be aware of that. You have to be completely honest with yourself, with your colleagues, with your partners, supervisors, whoever that may be, whoever that those persons are. And if you need to leave, then you need to leave, because unfortunately the communities that we work in cannot really handle someone else's trauma also, right?
right. Yeah.
They're
Mm.
already going through a lot, so it's not right. And I think that's it's something that we see that happens a lot in this sort of work. But yeah, it's very important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm curious on that front. Can you talk to us at all about like what does what does recruitment look like when you're putting together a delegation somewhere? How do you prep people, or how do you I guess if there's somebody who's curious about this, about being an accompanier to a community um outside of their own, what are the first steps that you would suggest to a person to figure out, is this a call for you? What kind of work needs to be done to do that
Well,
well?
I think in this, for recruitment, I would look at obviously some technical qualifications first. See, so sometimes the language can be a big barrier, right? um, so that's something, like, if you cannot speak to the person that you want to accompany or understand them, um, I don't think it's helpful. Your heart might be at the right space, but you know
Your
because there
heart
are
needs
people.
some skills as well
Yes,
to go with it.
yes, you need some skills. So I think being able to connect with them, really. So language, right? I think that's a um, huge factor to consider, right? And then, more than that, if what your own background is, like, what is your history, right? Do you have you been with Are you able to cope in such difficult conditions at times, because a lot of time accompaniers are in really remote communities with sometimes not access to internet, or they have to climb a hill to get some network, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are difficult and challenging situations, and you need to be honest with the people you're trying to recruit, and they need to be honest with themselves. Is that something I can do, right?
Okay.
Because we are used to our phones and our laptops and everything. Like, okay, this is, I want to check this, want to send a message, want to post something, and that's might not be possible there in such areas. So that's, I'm giving you a very uh, extreme example, but that's just, it's just one part of this work, and I think it's very important to that potential accompaniers and people recruiting them are aware that these are serious limitations for people. And um, another would be health. Like, do you consider yourself um, a moderately healthy person, or would you require a lot of medical attention? Right. That's something to consider too, because in certain cases, like a hospital might be 2 to 3 hours away. So
Mm-hmm.
God forbid, if something
Right.
happens, right? What do you do then, right? So,
Yeah, I
uh,
feel like this is the kind of thing that like people think it's like a mission trip,
yeah,
right? And the reality is that the immersion that you're involved in is just taxing in a whole different way. I mean, like
yeah,
on a multitude of levels, right? From
yeah,
the psychic to the physical. So,
yep,
um, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of chances for people to think they can do this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then find out they can't,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Like, it could mean that a person goes as, like, is very motivated, their high heart is in the right space, uh, and then when they get there, then they're like, oh, you know what? I don't think I can do it. So then
Sure, yeah,
that's I mean, that's not good for either party, not the person sending them, the person who's going there, or the community who's receiving them, right? All three are like, okay. And I think to be able to mitigate these things, these incidents, I think honesty, transparency, giving potential accompaniers a sort of a crash course on what their living conditions would be like,
sure.
what are the sort of stories, a cultural and social context. I think if you're able to give them that, then they can make an informed decision as to would they like to go on this trip or not. And I think, yeah, like, we owe it to the communities and to the companies to provide this, right?
Right. Yeah. Because if you a smaller group of well-equipped accompaniers is going to be able to focus on the relationship building more strongly and without crisis and distraction than a group of well-hearted but not well prepared
Yeah,
accompaniers who now you're in crisis. Okay.
So you've been with the Peace Fellowship now. I think you said what, like 2 months, right?
yeah,
So
about 2.5 months. Yeah,
so you must have everything figured out by now.
Yeah, all of
almost,
Uh,
almost.
it.
so what what do you see as like the first thing you need to focus on? Because I know the one thing I do know, right, is that our accompaniment program needs work. And that there's a lot of building that can be done there, and there's a lot of potential there. And I know the executive director and other folks, they feel very strongly that
Yeah.
this is an important and passionate thing that needs to continue. So, um, what are your hopes, your goals?
All right. So, Ben, I think one of my top priorities right now is to revive this program. This program basically came to a standstill after COVID, after the pandemic, right? So what I'm what's on my plate is to revive this program, starting with Colombia. The PPF has had a really fruitful partnership with the IPC in Colombia, the Iglesia Presbiteriana de Colombia, right, the Presbyterian Church of Colombia. So What I've done right now is trying to revive that partnership with them, and then identify communities who might who might be in a need of
Mm.
accompaniment there. So with um, support of Laurie, our executive director, I am currently just planning a visit to Colombia in February to assess those needs with communities. My goal is to go with our partners, IPC, and visit these communities in two regions of Colombia and speak to them, conduct a needs assessment and a feasibility study to see if if there's an actual need of accompaniment in these communities, and being absolutely clear that how it differs from charity work, because sometimes when
Sure.
foreigners and especially Americans or Western people from Western countries come, there is there's an association of some sort of financial resources coming in, but I want to be clear that that's not what this program would be doing. What we have to offer is advocacy,
Right.
is support, is help in advocacy at the local, national, and international level back here in the US. That's what we can help with. Um, so yeah, my what I'm trying to do is trying to develop a design develop this trip, and then once we are in Colombia, trying to conduct a needs assessment with communities, and if there is a need, then do a feasibility study so that I can be prepared to provide all that information that I just shared that should be provided to potential accompaniers, including logistics, administrative stay, and all that stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, just do a feasibility study to see if that's possible, if the security conditions, is it safe, what are the risks involved. So yeah, all that fun stuff, is that's my goal for this Colombia visit in February.
Nice. So, and I'm assuming when this episode releases, this is a guess. But my guess is that you're gonna have two types of listeners, however you're consuming this media. Um, you're gonna have two types of folks engaging this. One will be people who hear the skills health call assessment and go, oh, I think that's work I could maybe do. And then you'll have people who are like, I definitely will be someone who stays on the ground in my own city. But both of those folks are in the organization that you work with, that we're all a part of. And I feel like both of those folks, there are ways to support even if you're not on the ground.
Yeah, definitely.
So my question for you is, for both of those groups, for the people who are hearing this and maybe picking up a call to join in the company work, and to people hearing this and going, I definitely won't be a frontliner there, but I think it's really interesting and I believe in the cause. What would be your ask or encouragement for how to engage?
Well, people, and like I said, I think it's important for people to be honest with themselves, understanding the real situations, what their mind and body can is capable of. I think that's a conversation that everyone needs to have individually. And if they think that that accompaniment, a frontline accompaniment work is not for them, there are still ways to support um, people, these communities, and that's through advocacy in your network, right? So we will hope to get some reports back from accompaniers when they're, hopefully installed in and embedded in their communities, and you know it will be extremely helpful if people here in the US can use the analysis of the meta-analysis of those reports and advocate for those human rights of these
Mm.
communities, right, in their networks here in the US, by asking your elected representatives, like, hey, this is what my colleagues or partners or my friends here in Colombia, they have to report. This is a serious cause of concern, and what are we doing about it? How can we ensure that these human rights are respected and protected, right? So that's something that a person doesn't need to really go down to Colombia or Mexico or
Mhm.
anywhere for that, right? You can do that in your circles, in your network. Um, yeah, so that's how I think they can still be involved in sort of reaching towards the end goal, which is advocating for human rights. Um, yeah, yeah,
That kind of made me think about so I'm sure we're all aware that we had an election,
yeah.
um, and some of us are less excited about the results than others. And I also confess I have really not talked about it much. But so the question, the reason I bring it up, right, is I
Is to
don't
bum
see it.
everybody out. No.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
just to bring everyone down. That's what I do. I'm the Grim Reaper of podcasts. So the your work is not going to get easier, right? Obviously. So, but also the dynamic here between communities is getting troublesome, right? We seem to be insistent on dividing ourselves deeper rather than doing stuff. Hispanic, Latino community, the Black community, my own LGBTQ community. I mean, there's a lot of communities that are going to be under attack. Do you foresee a need for domestic accompaniment here in the United States?
No, Ben, thanks for bringing that up. And that's, I think, one of the misconceptions or assumptions people have about accompaniment or peacemaking work, that it's mainly international context.
Sure,
Because
yeah.
that's something that you know may bring in our own education or the media that we consume is like, okay,
Mhm.
peacemaking is for a country in Africa or or a country in South America. But it's a strategy. It's not it's not a cuisine that belongs to one country, right? It's a strategy, and that can be and should be implemented here in the U.S. Right? And I think accompaniment has a lot of potential to right here in the U.S. There are communities who are food insecure in the U.S. Right?
Mhm,
There are
mhm.
communities who don't have uh, access to drinking water, um, right? Or gas, right? These are basic human rights, and
Sure.
I think accompaniment, the same principles, be it in Colombia or Mexico, they can be applied here too, right?
Mhm.
Um, you can accompany your neighbors, right? That's the beauty of it. You don't need to be outside of your country. You can, maybe there's a community in your or neighborhood in your city or in your town that is um, you know that is food insecure. So what do you do then? You can go help in food kitchens and soup kitchens, sorry, and food banks. Yeah, that's one way. But you can also accompany them while they demand food security, right?
Mm.
Through systemic policy changes with their elected representatives. So I think it definitely, most definitely, has a potential and should be implemented here in the US too. And I think, as my role as a accompaniment strategist, I have been, I've been having conversations with Laurie and other people about how, maybe not now because I have my plate full into reviving this program in Colombia right now, but these are some things to think about, because as this program progresses and is transformed, I think having a sort of uh, like accompaniment, I don't want to call it accompaniment site, but you know accompaniment is implemented could be implemented here in the US too. So I definitely see a scope and potential for it.
Yeah, well, and I'm thinking about when you provided your initial definition of accompaniment, you started with like it's a way of identifying the roots of conflict
Yeah,
before things escalate to violence.
yeah,
And as you're talking, I'm realizing like, yeah, that's absolutely not a strategy that only works on a like nation to nation level, global to
Yeah.
global level. That scales up and down as much as you possibly need it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like for folks who are, nervous about traveling, for example, right? Um, why shouldn't you find a community in your own
Yeah.
backyard, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and walk with them, right?
Yeah.
Or encourage
Yeah.
your church to do it or something, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it seems like a very doable, microcosmic thing. It doesn't have to be giant, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm wondering, Ben and Moody, both, I'm curious your thoughts on this. This, as if you put it through that definition of identifying conflict and addressing it before things escalate, and also just that like very basic relational, like being with somebody in need. I feel like there's a lot of ways in which a lot of communities do this intuitively already.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There are I know there are programs like I'm thinking about people who literally accompany folks seeking abortions in very
Yeah.
charged cities
yeah.
into
Yeah.
clinics. Like that's the same kind of
Yeah.
work. It's just at a very different scale.
Yeah.
Transgender
Um,
folks, right, who are being helped, yeah, to
Yeah.
medical procedures and medications, and yeah.
yes. And even like smaller scale, and this may sound silly. I don't want it to sound silly. I'm just trying to think like trying to make this feel less like a big like capital A accompaniment project. This is like what women do when you accompany each other to the bathroom at a club.
Yeah,
This is like
There you go.
being
Yeah.
just being helping each other access safety
Yeah.
in ways
Yeah.
where just having a witness can do absolute wonders in mitigating
Yeah.
safety and mitigating risk.
yeah. As you're saying that, Mood, it will let you talk eventually, but the
Mood it, please just jump in. Ben and I will do this
because
forever,
because
but
what
no.
I'm thinking is, I mean, I think one of the things about this kind of work that I find, I don't know if it's refreshing is the word or encouraging is the word, is that really, in a way, like to what Annika's talking about, right? The way we accompany each other to restrooms or down the street or to school, or I mean, the various
Mm-hmm.
ways we try to keep each other safe. Like you're actually tapping into to instincts, that I
Yeah,
believe
this
to
is
be,
deeply
yeah,
human stuff.
like I
Deeply.
Yeah.
think this is what God made us to do, right? And so this idea, this is what it means to be in community. And so, it's community building, right? On a massive transformational kind of scale, essentially. But it starts with just, you know, those kinds of things, right? I mean, offering to do something for somebody is a life-changing moment for some folks. And so, we really are, I think, tapping into the best of people, when you ask them to do this work.
Yeah. I completely agree with both of you, Ben and Annika. And Annika, I might use your going to the toilet reference
Do it.
if I'm asked to explain this the next time what accompaniment is. But you are absolutely right, both of you. Intuitively, humans, we are, be it your friend in a club, or your friend walking back from school, right? You
Mm-hmm.
just walk together, and that's
Yeah.
basically what it is, right? That is what it is. Now, sometimes, now they might not be going through like these really uh, you know, crisis that we were just talking about earlier. But they might have had a bad day at school, right? And they are just telling you about it. So what do? You listen to them, right? That's what you're doing. You're listening to them, and that's what it is. That's what it's all about. It's about being physically and emotionally present with someone, right? Without having that savior complex. So I think that's all it is about, and it definitely should be implemented here. These kind of things. I know it is, like you mentioned, there is already like people accompanying women in need of abortion to places where they can safely get it. That's one way, and that is accompanying them. That's
Mm-hmm.
that is what they're doing. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
you named humility as a key ingredient earlier too, and I think that even that plays into not only like a discipline you need going into it. Like,
Yeah.
can you step in and not cast yourself as
Yeah.
the savior, as the
Yeah.
hero? But I think it's one of those, there's the discipline aspect, but there's also the empowerment aspect. Because
Yeah.
if you can come at this as like, what is this at its barest level? It's being with somebody in a
Yeah.
space. Like, that makes it feel less intimidating. Because
Yeah.
I've never been to Colombia, but I have been to the club. Like, I
Yeah.
know how it works there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like here's where I'm landing on this, right? Because I started this with like, I have no idea what you do.
Right.
And so, we've spent what 45 minutes now kind of talking through some of this stuff. And where I've kind of landed now is what you actually do is foster the two things I think are foundational for peace to exist, and that is humility and empathy, right? Those are key ingredients,
Yeah.
right, to lasting peace. And so, um, I think what you it's remarkable. I mean, I'm sold. I'm in. I want this to happen in a big way now. Like, I think this could be really, really transformation. I mean, this is what peacemakers do, right? We
Yeah.
just try to get people to care about each other, right?
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
empathize with each other and to sort of
Yeah.
relate to each other. That's why the club example is such a good one, right?
Yeah.
That's how we build empathy, right? You sure you've
Yeah.
never been to Colombia, but you've been
Sure.
scared, right?
Yeah.
You've been
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
You've been I've not had money before, right? I've struggled to get food before. I mean, we've done these things. So yeah, I think I'm pretty jazzed about what you do.
Thank you. It's been a really, really fun conversation, and yeah, like you said, you've not been to Colombia, but you understand the fear that your friend might be going through,
Right.
going to the restroom by herself, right? That's
Mhm.
something you understand that because you have been in place. So even it is being humble, it is empathizing, it is listening to them, it's really being with them, standing in solidarity with them. Yeah, that's all it's about. Accompaniment.
Yeah, so like, I mean, Lori, if you're listening, I get it. Um, because this does seem like, I mean, this seems like very foundational peace building work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to draw out the accompaniment as just the club metaphor, except I'm gonna for a minute more, because I also I appreciate that that also helps dismantle this idea that, like, this is work where you inherently are putting yourself in an area in crisis, because you're putting yourself in an area in where there is a need of some kind, um and that meshes with this, because I've heard some stories, those reports, those witnesses, from other people within the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship and in that more accompaniment model of ministry work, where they talk about what they're doing as relationship building and really just telling stories about spending time with the people who live there and getting to know their kids and making meals together. Um, and I think, because I'm a child of that very, like, American Puritan rooted, like, well, if you're not working yourself to the bone, what are you even doing? Um, Understanding of mission. And so I think it's been tough for me to hear those stories and see, like, so what are you doing? Because the answer
Hmm.
to what are you doing is relationship building.
Yeah.
Um, and but I'm also thinking about when I'm going out with my friends and blowing off steam, like, what is it we're doing is we're doing the business of being human together, and we're building
Yeah.
the trust, and we're building the friendship, and we're building the camaraderie, that then we do those things because we're human and they're worth doing, period, full stop. And then that kicks in too when there's projects and
Yeah.
there's rallies and there's letters to write to congressmen and whatever. Like, the groundwork is then laid in the fun stuff, in the and then the work and the fun and the work and the lived experience all kind of rolls together too.
I'm sorry. You just sparked a. I've been on a Thomas Merton kick and I've been listening to lectures by Thomas Merton, a great monastic thinker. Um, and as Annika was talking, one of the things I thought about was this idea that, like, I'm losing my thought, so we're gonna have to edit this part now because I can't
No,
finish my.
dig in deep. What does Thomas Merton have to tell us?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I forgot it was based on what you were just saying, and then I lost it. Um, well, I'm listening to lectures on humility, actually, oddly enough, because Thomas Merton, as a monastic, talks about humility all the time. And there's this idea, right, that oh, I know what I was going to say. So Thomas Merton posits this theory that one of the problems we have is that we have accepted as natural things that are fundamentally unnatural. And what he's talking about are things like violence as an inevitability, peace as an impossibility,
Yeah.
the idea that justice cannot be accomplished, right? The idea that this is just the human condition and this is just the way it is. And so his point was these are grossly unnatural ways of thinking, and they have nothing to
Mm,
do with how God actually created us to interact with one another. And so, you're actually peacemaking to me is about teaching human beings to be natural, and to sort of accept that we are not created to be violent. We are not created to be
mm,
divided. We are not created, we are created in the sense of we are essentially identical, right, in our inner working. Right? And so the rest of it is, what we do with it. But so that idea, right, that, what this work is countercultural to Americans, because and I'm going to be bummed out on Americans for a while. I'm sorry, Americans. I'm mad at you right now. You're just going to have to deal with this. But so the but there's this idea, right, that this thing that we live in now is just the inevitable way things are,
Yeah.
right? That division and racism and violence and hates and these things are just like this is the normal human way. And the stuff that you're doing is airy fairy PC stuff that goes against our nature.
Hmm.
And so I don't know what point I'm making right now, except that Thomas Merton's point was we have to teach ourselves about our true nature again.
Yeah.
And our
yeah.
true nature is not a nature of violence. It's a nature of peace, and it's a nature of love and connection.
Definitely, Ben. I think, it's very easy to just write off that that's just how things are, There can never be peace in the Middle East, right? That's just how things are. It's very easy to just, I think that's a very
Right.
easy approach and easy world view to have, especially in the times that we live in. No, peace is always a possibility. Uh, Enjoyment of human rights by everyone, everywhere is a possibility. It's just it requires work. It requires work from all of us coming together and working towards that goal. And I think, that's a natural thing. That's a natural state of us. We are so divided, as you were saying, by our differences that we forget to see, what unites us also. It's just we are all humans on this earth, right? We are all breathing the same air, right? And so I think if there's a conversation shift to what unites us, then what you hear out in the media is just, oh, it's person of this color. Those divisive features are
Right.
always like the the headlines. That's what makes the headlines. But if you shift that conversation to, like, what, this is possible. This is possible, and there are people doing incredible work everywhere, and those stories, I think, need to be uplifted more than just this divisive propaganda that's being spewed out. Uh,
Propaganda is a perfect word for it. Yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I think, that's the natural state, is working together, coming together and working together. I think that is our natural state as humans. We were doing that since we were cavemen, and that's how things were done. So yeah, I I completely agree with your points there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to Thomas Merton's point too, I feel like the speed with which this concept of accompaniment for the two hosts for this program went from feeling very nebulous to very like intuitive, um, is to his point of just that propaganda is so powerful. It messes with how you think so much, but like as soon as you do get back in touch with that relational reality, it's like, oh, yes, that's right. I do actually love people when I am not traumatized and angry, and can access trust.
Yeah, we've become like
Yeah.
I call it moral laziness, right? The idea that like it's just really easy to say I can't do anything about it,
Yeah.
right? Like peace can't happen because we're people and we stink, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's morally lazy. Um, like that's that's I don't know what to call that, right? I mean, that's what values motivate that kind of thinking. Accept the values of those in power who want you to have that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that value is power. And but we hear it all the time, right? Our media is filled with this idea that we can't fix it because we're too divided. We can't do this because we'll never agree on it. We can't. I don't think we're a divided nation at all. In fact, polling bears that out on most of these issues, right? We have political problems, sure, but I'm not sure it's the body politic that is the problem. So, um, I guess we should probably. I know we need to wrap up, but where do what is the future of this work? Do you think beyond
Uh,
like I know Colombia is our first focus, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Are there other things for you as an individual, right? Are there other things on your radar that are like these
Yeah.
are yeah.
So yeah, definitely, Ben. I think Colombia is just because you know we've had that historic, really fruitful partnership with the folks in Colombia, and it's that's Colombia actually is a very good example that peace is possible. It
Mm,
it is the longest armed conflict in the world, spanning over 5 decades. Okay, the civil conflict over 5 decades, and then they signed the peace treaty. Is it um, is it absolute peace right now? No, no. But the implementation in Colombia is really something worth celebrating. The implementation of the peace accord. There is a significant change in the lives of a significant portion of the population there. So you know um, that is, I mean, a good reference point for us to like that peace is possible, right? And to answer your question, yeah, I think Colombia is definitely what's next, but after that, what's on my radar is um, you know the migrant the the conditions that the migrant population are
mm,
facing, right?
right.
Be it all the way through Central America to the U.S. borders. I think that's something that's on my radar. So maybe Mexico, the U.S. Mexico border, that could be the next entry point for the PPF's accompaniment program. And also going circling back to what we were talking about, its implementation here in the US. I think that's where I would really like to, uh, see develop is just not a full scale accompaniment, but like accompaniment program, let's just say, like, so because when you start talking about programs, a lot of people get scared. Like, oh, you know what is this massive thing that you're coming with? No, just having these conversations with people who can listen and have an open, transparent conversation, and letting you know that they're probably doing this anyhow, but just you know having these conversations, maybe having like a support system that helps people in the US accompany their neighbors, the communities in their cities, because you'll see there are a lot of um, migrant families now here in the US who require a lot of support, right? So how can we help them adapt to their new lives? And that's accompaniment, right? That's accompaniment. You don't need to go anywhere outside your city for that. So that's I think a very um, good application of this strategy, accompaniment strategy, is helping migrant families here. So I think that's how I envision this program's future. Yeah.
Well, I feel very informed.
It's good to know.
No, honestly, I mean, thank you so much, like for clarifying for me what this is exactly, and it makes sense for me now on spiritual, practical, and emotional levels that it didn't before. So I appreciate that. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I think it's been a really enjoyable conversation for me too, to just share my work, share my life experiences, and have a laugh or two with you both. So I think, yeah, this has been really really nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And to folks listening and watching, I would add, if you have heard something in Mudit's work and hopes and dreams that you think you could be a good partner in, please email info@presbypeacefellowship.org. We'd love to put you in touch as this accompaniment work, PPF specifically, grows. And if you consider yourself a peacemaker in the world in a similar lane or a totally different lane and would like to share your story on our podcast, also email same address, info@presbypeacefellowship.org. We would love to hear from you and have you also come teach us what you do in the world and how it helps build peace. Thank you, Mudit. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yep.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.